Did you know that it's not recommended to eat your sweet potatoes just after you've harvested them? I'll tell you why later in the video. But in the meantime, stick around because I'm going to show you how I take one of these and turn it into lots and lots of these. It's so easy, and I'll show you how right now. G'day everybody, Daz here from my Aussie Garden and Kitchen, Garden Edition. And the sweet potato, it's one of my favourite things to grow, and I'll get straight into it. I grow mine a little bit different to a lot of people. I'm sure you've seen the method where you take the sweet potato and you cut it and you put it into a glass of water and you have it hanging there by toothpicks and you wait for the little sprouts to grow out of it, the slips. Well, what I do is I basically take mine and put it into dirt, and I find that a lot faster. So what I do is I get a container like this, put potting mix into it, then I get my sweet potato, which doesn't have to be as big as this, put it into the soil about halfway down, so you've got half under the soil, half above the soil, and then I'll put that into a warm spot because these are a vegetable that love warm weather. So I'll either put this onto a heat mat and keep it there until it starts sending out slips, or I can put it, say, in a window, a warm window where it's getting some nice warmth. It's heating up the soil, it's heating up the sweet potato, and it's going to send what are called slips, which are the shoots that you see people pick out. So over time, the sweet potato will send out those slips, and they're what we actually break off, and then we plant them into the soil. Now you can actually plant the slips straight into the soil, but it's quite common for people to break them off carefully, put them into a jar of clean water, and then wait for roots to form at the bottom of the slips, and then planting them that way. Personally, I put mine in the jar of water and wait for the roots just to make sure, but I've seen many cases where people have actually broken them off and planted them straight away, and they've been fine. The sweet potato slips will do really well in water, and in fact, these here are from about 8 months ago. I never used them. I've just left them sitting in a glass of water. It's been in the rain, so the rain's been refilling it. I've not been changing the water, and you can see how much they've actually survived in the water for that long. So spring's coming up and you're all excited. I want to get my sweet potatoes growing in the ground. That's fine, but you need to prepare because these sweet potato slips, these things here, they need to grow first. So I do recommend a good 2 to 3 months beforehand, before your planned date of planting, get this all happening. Get your sweet potato into the dirt, like I said before, get it ready, let it grow, and then over those couple of months, you're going to get the slips growing. And then when spring comes, once you've timed it nicely, you'll have these growing like this, looking in better condition than these, of course, ready to put into the soil, and away you go. So when it comes to planting, I'll get a grow bag, but you can put them into the ground, not a problem. And the soil is a 50-50 mix of a nice dark garden soil and a compost that I make here in my garden. I'll give that a nice mix and blend it together. Then I'll make a hole, get a single slip, put it into the hole, and then that slip will be nicely in the soil, about 1 foot to 2 feet apart. That way, what's going to happen is the sweet potatoes are going to grow in the ground underneath that slip there, and you want to make sure there's enough room around each one so a nice sweet potato can form. So you don't want to crowd them too much. So just get in the soil and you should be good to go with a good foot or so in between each one. When you get your slips into the soil, you really need to make sure you get some water onto them and make sure they stay moist for the first couple of weeks. Not too much, you don't want to drown them, but just make sure you go and check your soil every now and then, every day or so, and just make sure you can feel that there's a little bit of dampness. If it's not, give it some water just to make sure. Now I do recommend putting them into the soil in the afternoon. You don't want to be doing it in the middle of a hot day. So if it's really hot weather, wait till the end of the day. But just out of good practice, try and wait till the end of the day anyway. That way you've not got the harsh sun beating down onto those poor little slips sitting there all by themselves. Oh, when the slips go into the soil, I put a little bit of bone meal, or blood and bone as we say here in Australia, onto the surface of the soil. So over time, that's going to seep down, and when the roots need it, they can get some nutrition out of the soil. And I like to throw some mulch around the bottom of them too. The mulch is going to keep the moisture in the soil and suppress the weeds, and it eventually breaks down as organic matter too. Now once those slips are in the ground and they start to establish, it won't take long, you'll see them standing upright by themselves and starting to form new leaves, and then that way you know that they're really taking to the soil they're in, and hopefully they're going to produce nice sweet potatoes for you. The The main reason I grow my sweet potatoes in grow bags is I want them on a shelf off the ground. We have the forest just here behind me, and we get a lot of deadly snakes. Now, the snakes leave us alone, but you've got to be aware of them. So I just prefer that if I'm going to have something like vines all over the ground and I can't see what's inside the vines amongst them all, I prefer them up off the ground. And what I'll do is I'll get some sort of trellising system, put it behind the grow bags, and then the vines can go over all of the grow bags and then up along the trellising system, just like I've got here. Now that those sweet potato slips are in the soil and they're growing really well, and you can see vines coming out all over the place and beautiful leaves coming off them, you just keep the water up to them, just checking the soil every now and then, making sure it's a little bit moist, not too boggy, and then they'll do their own thing under the ground, growing those nice big tubers. And as far as feeding comes, maybe every 6 to 8 weeks, I'll put some basic fertilizer, like a fish emulsion or a seaweed emulsion, and pour that over them. Give it a bit of a spray on the leaves or wash over the leaves too, because they can take in food via the leaves. And that's it. The beauty of having them grow over the hot season like summer is that they're in no danger of frost. But when it comes to autumn, and especially later autumn, getting closer to winter, if you've still got them growing, be really conscious of frosts. You need to protect those vines. You cannot expose them to frosts. If the vines get destroyed, okay, the vines are gone, and that's it for your growing. Now, the tubers won't be destroyed though. So if you do have a snap frost and you forget to cover them, and you lose your vines and they look all burnt and shriveled up, you can still dig down into those tubers, and the tubers will be underground because they'll be unaffected thanks to the soil being around them and insulating them from the frost. When it comes to harvesting time, you generally wait for the leaves to die off, and that's a really good indication. They'll go yellow and die off, and you know that your tubers should be ready. The flesh of the sweet potatoes is very soft and sensitive when you're digging it up, so be careful not to scratch them or damage them in any way. You're not going to be able to help a couple of nicks here and there, so don't stress if you do have a couple of nicks in your sweet potatoes, but do try to avoid it. You can see here that mine have been washed, but I purely did that so you can have a better look at them. Do not wash yours. What you can do is just give them a bit of a brush down with a light cloth or a light brush if you have to, but please don't wash them or handle them roughly. You really have to take care of those skins until they cure. Now, I've actually picked mine probably a couple of weeks earlier than I'd like to, but I'm having pest pressure from rats and mice. I've noticed there's been a few sweet potatoes that have been nibbled on, so I don't want to risk losing too many, so I've dug mine up now and they'll be fine. What I said earlier about not eating your sweet potatoes as soon as you harvest them is because you need to let them cure. Now, what I do is I take them and put them in a nice warm environment with a bit of humidity for about 10 days. And then what that does is it takes the starches in the potatoes and turns it into a sugary flavor, a sweet flavor. So instead of having a potato-like flavor at the start, just let them cure. And once they're cured, they go sweet. And that's how you get that beautiful sweet flavor that sweet potatoes are famous for. I wasn't able to cure my sweet potatoes like I normally do because my greenhouse blew over in the wind and it ripped and all sorts of stuff. So this year I've got a raised garden bed that's got a dome, and what I've done is I've put a heat mat in the bottom to get my temperature up. I've put my sweet potatoes in. I've got a towel, a damp towel, put that over the top of them, and then I put the dome on top of that, and then that makes them nice and warm and cozy with a bit of humidity, and I'll leave them in there for about 10 days. The top of the garden bed has 2 ventilation holes. Now, I've left them closed the whole time to keep the humidity in, and that's worked pretty well for the 10 days that I've had my sweet potatoes curing. The 10 days are up. I'll take the sweet potatoes out of that warm, humid environment, and I'll just sit them on a table just for a little bit, just to let them dry off. Then once they're nice and dry, I'll put them into a crate or a box in my dark pantry where I store my food for long-term storage, and they can sit in there and they'll last for such a long time. It would be fantastic if you click on this video next, and also if you would tell your friends, share me around and let everybody know about me. I thank you so much for being here. I do appreciate it, and hopefully I'll see you in the next cooking or gardening video. Bye for now.